The small restroom of the suburban gas station was thick with steam. On the mirror, fogged over by the early morning chill, a middle-aged man stood, quietly looking at himself. The blue gas attendant's uniform was wrinkled. A worn-out name tag pinned to his left chest read Jake Parker. No one knew that the name was fake, and certainly no one knew that the man standing before the mirror was Logan Mitchell, the founder and CEO of the Bright Fuel gas station chain, a system with over 40 stations across 3 states. The last time he had worn an employee uniform was more than 25 years ago. Back then, Bright Fuel was just a single, small store, a dream that began with long overnight shifts and minimum wage. Now, that dream was shaking. "You look like a failure," Logan whispered to himself, his hand pulling at the tight collar. 3 days of stubble, messy hair hidden under a baseball cap, and a pair of non-prescription glasses made him look even more like an exhausted worker in the midst of a recession. But this very disguise was his ticket back to the ground level. The latest quarterly revenue report revealed a disturbing reality: a mass exodus of staff, a surge in customer complaints, and an unusual sharp decline in profits at several stations, especially station number 12 in Medford, Oregon. Logan couldn't just sit back any longer. He needed to see with his own eyes what was happening, not from his glass office on the 20th floor, but right on the sales floor, where the smell of gasoline mixed with the chime of the cash register and the presence of people. A sense of unease crept into his heart as he reached for the door. It felt as if on the other side wasn't just another day of undercover work, but a gateway to the wounds he had unwittingly allowed to fester for far too long in the empire he had built. The air inside the station's convenience store was bright with the glare of fluorescent lights. The automatic door chimed in a steady rhythm. Customers were in a hurry. Employees were tired. But Logan's eyes stopped on one person, a slender girl. Her brown hair, tied back in a hurry, was focused on the cash register. Her eyes were dark with lack of sleep, her hands trembling slightly each time she counted money. But what made Logan pause wasn't her exhaustion. It was the fear hidden beneath every gesture. Her name was Sophie Lane, and she had no idea that her new colleague today, the ordinary man named Jake, was actually her boss, and that she would be the one to lead him to the dark truth that the entire system had overlooked for so many years. "You're Jake Parker, right? The transfer from station number 6. A voice rang out from near the counter. Logan turned his head and met the gaze of a medium-built man with neatly combed hair, a square jaw, and a rigid posture. The man extended a hand to shake, his grip so strong it felt like he was testing to see if Logan's bones would break. "I'm Dennis Cole, the lead shift manager here. Welcome to Station 12, the highest performing station in the Bright Fuel system." Logan nodded, trying to keep his emotions in check. "Thanks for the opportunity. No need for formalities. We're serious about our work here. There are no free rides." Dennis narrowed his eyes, then turned and shouted, "Sophie, show the new guy the ropes." His voice cracked through the air like a whip. The girl at the register, Sophie Lane, flinched. She hastily folded a receipt, said goodbye to the customer, and walked toward them. Her posture was hunched, her shoulders drawn in like a defensive reflex ingrained in her subconscious. "I'm Sophie," she said, her voice so soft it was as if she were afraid its sound might bother someone. "I'll show you how to operate the system, manage inventory, customer interactions." Dennis said nothing more, just shot them a warning look and strode towards his office. Only when the back door closed did the space around the counter seem to calm down. Sophie let out a soft breath. Logan noticed her hands were still trembling slightly as she opened the computer screen. She began to walk Logan through every small task: how to open a new transaction, how to print a voided receipt, how to save a loyal customer's information. She was meticulous, precise, not missing a single step. But there was one thing that made Logan frown. Not a single word was mentioned about the customer experience. No smile, no "thank you for visiting," no emphasis on any of the courtesy rules from the training manual that Logan himself had approved 2 years ago. Sophie's entire instruction revolved around one invisible but haunting rule: don't make Dennis angry. Her voice suddenly dropped when there were no customers around. "If the register is off by a single dollar at the end of the shift, you'll be written up for theft. 3 times and you're fired. No one explains. No arguments. No rules." Logan felt the blood in his veins run cold. He had written the code for this POS system. He knew everything about it, but here, the only thing operating the system was fear. He looked at Sophie. There wasn't a single spark in her eyes. Her lips were chapped. One of her eyes was slightly bruised, like the trace of many sleepless nights. "Do you have a family?" she asked, suddenly, as if forgetting her role as a trainer. Logan hesitated. "A daughter, but she's all grown up." Sophie nodded slowly. "I have a 6-year-old. He has asthma. His medicine is over $300 a month. I can't lose this job." Her sentence was cut short by the sound of the office door slamming. Dennis emerged, his gaze like a laser. "Sophie, why are you still standing here? Are the customers gone? Then go clean the coffee area. Jake, get back to the counter. Around here, anyone who can't handle the pressure disappears sooner or later." He turned and walked away, leaving behind a thick, suffocating atmosphere. Sophie said nothing more. She lowered her head and walked away like a person completely drained of energy. As for Logan, he stood frozen. Inside him, an old feeling was surging rage. He once thought he understood his employees, understood his system. But here, amid the smell of cheap coffee and machine oil-stained uniforms, he was facing something that no report could ever show: fear. Institutionalized. The gas station moved into the afternoon, with the harsh Oregon sun beating through the dust-streaked glass. In the small break room in the back, Logan took the opportunity to sit on an old plastic chair, leaning his back against a supply cabinet. The coffee in his hand was cold. The room was unusually quiet, a silence so profound it was unsettling. A soft sigh broke the silence. Logan glanced to his side. A young man, wearing the same uniform as him, was restocking items in the freezer. "Mike!" He introduced himself without looking up. "You the new guy?" "Yeah," Logan nodded, trying to stay in character. Transferred from Station 6. You're lucky. Not getting yelled at by Dennis on your first day is a good sign. Mike let out a hollow laugh, then lowered his voice. I've been here 6 months, and 6 months is the longest anyone's lasted besides Sophie. Logan looked at him, surprised. Last month, 3 people quit. The month before that, 2. No one says it out loud, but everyone knows why. Dennis. He has his own way of managing. Mike's voice grew quieter. I once saw him force a female employee to sign a theft confession just because the register was off by $3. Sign or quit. After she signed, he cut her hours. She quit on her own. Logan tightened his grip on the coffee cup. The numbers on the reports were now becoming faces, voices, and the names of those who had vanished from the system. The walkie-talkie on Mike's belt crackled to life. Mike, car wash, now. Good luck, man, Mike said, patting Logan's shoulder lightly before walking away. He was left alone. Before him was the old, dingy room, a flickering light bulb, a wobbly plastic chair, a refrigerator rattling as if it were about to break. But it was that very silence that painted a clearer picture of what he was beginning to understand. The empire he had painstakingly built was rotting from the inside. 15 minutes later, Logan returned to the checkout counter. Sophie was standing there, holding a roll of small bills. Her hands were shaking visibly. Before she could place it in the drawer, the roll slipped from her grasp, hit the floor, and broke apart, sending dozens of coins scattering across the tile. The sound of metal echoed, sharp and cold, as if drawing every eye in the store toward her. And then Dennis appeared. His face darkened. His eyes were as cold as steel. His voice hissed through his teeth. My God, Sophie, can you get through a single shift without screwing everything up? Sophie knelt down, frantically gathering the coins. I'm sorry. Dennis bent down, his voice lower, more dangerous. I haven't forgotten about the shorted cash from the other day. Do you want me to start a second file on you? Logan was standing less than 3 steps away, but time seemed to have frozen. He had negotiated million-dollar deals. He had faced the toughest shareholders, but never before had a voice made his blood run so cold. Sophie said nothing. She picked up all the coins, carefully placed them in the drawer, and then returned to her post behind the counter like a shadow, a soulless silhouette. Dennis turned his back, pulled out his phone, and disappeared into the back office. The door closed gently, as if no storm had just passed through. Logan walked over to Sophie, gently, quietly. Are you okay? He asked in a soft voice. Sophie didn't look at him. I'm fine, came the quick, lifeless reply, like an automated response. But her lips trembled slightly. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. She wasn't crying, but those eyes had been wet for a long time. Logan was speechless, not because Sophie was a victim, but because she wasn't the first, and she certainly wouldn't be the last. The next morning, the wall clock at Bright Fuel Station number 12 had just ticked past 700 a.m. In the cramped break area behind the counter, 5 employees were huddled around a peeling wooden table. On it were clipboards, receipts, and an unchecked inventory list. The flickering fluorescent light made everything even more irritating to look at. Dennis entered in his usual manner, a thin smile, a statistics ledger tucked under his arm, his eyes scanning everyone as if inspecting a troop of new recruits. "Good morning." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Before we start the shift, we have a few things to review." No one responded. The air was thick, as suffocating as an interrogation room. "Transaction performance yesterday," he said, flipping through the ledger. "Averaged 38.1 transactions per hour. Not bad, but not good enough." He turned to look directly at Sophie. "And you, Sophie Lane, are down 12% from last week." Sophie gripped the edge of her chair, trying to remain calm. Logan could clearly see her knuckles turning white. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Sorry doesn't increase revenue." Dennis replied with a smirk. "I want you to use your lunch break today to re-inventory the entire stockroom. Maybe that will help you focus better." The suggestion sounded gentle, but everyone understood it was a form of punishment. No one said anything. No one dared. Logan sat in a corner, pretending to flip through the shift log. But in reality, every word, every look, every breath was being recorded in his mind like a high-definition film. This was no longer strict management. This was psychological warfare. The meeting ended without anyone daring to be the first to stand up. Dennis pulled out his phone and went into the back office. A final ritual of control before letting go of the reins. Sophie walked quickly out of the room. Logan followed her. 12:15 p.m. The store was packed with people. The sunlight outside beat down, making the glass windows feel like they were melting. Dennis gestured. "Sophie, lunch break stockroom." Logan took her place at the cash register. His eyes kept glancing down the back hallway, where Sophie had just disappeared. 15 minutes later, Dennis left his office with a stack of papers in hand, heading straight for the stockroom. There was something strange about his expression. Smug, rushed, as if he had just received an exclusive gift from someone. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, then 30 minutes passed. Sophie did not return. Logan's heart began to beat faster. He turned to Mike, who was arranging snacks nearby. "Mike, can you watch the counter for a few minutes? I need to use the restroom." Mike glanced toward Dennis's office, then gave a slight nod. "Make it quick." Logan left the counter, crossed the hallway, but instead of turning into the restroom, he headed toward the stockroom. He stopped at the door. A very faint sound slipped through the crack of the door, crying. He knocked lightly. "Sophie, it's Jake." Silence. Then a trembling voice, as if choked. "I'm fine. Just doing inventory." Logan pushed the door open and stepped inside. The light was dim, a cramped room with boxes stacked high. Sophie was sitting in a corner on a wooden chair with a broken leg, her face flushed, her hands shaking. When she saw him, she quickly hid a piece of paper in her pocket. "What is that?" he asked, stepping closer. "It's nothing," she said, shaking her head. "Let me see it." A moment of silence. Then Sophie took out the crumpled piece of paper and placed it in his hand. The handwritten words were scrawled and angry: $750 by Friday, or the video goes to HR and the police. Logan stared at the note. His heart clenched. A wave of anger and pain washed over him, but not for Sophie. It was for the system that he had unwittingly allowed to exist. He looked up at her. "We need to talk, and this time, for real." In the cramped stockroom, Logan held the crumpled note Sophie had given him, something that seemed so small, yet weighed more than any financial report he had ever signed. $750 by Friday, or the video goes to HR and the police. The sloppy, bold words, written in a black marker, were scrawled beneath a copy of a transaction statement that had been highlighted in yellow. A section was marked "Cash Shortage Transaction," occurring right during Sophie's shift. He turned to look at her. Sophie could no longer maintain her composure. She bit her lip hard, her eyes glistening with tears. But what shocked Logan wasn't the fear in her eyes. It was the resignation. "Sophie," he called her name softly. "How long has he been doing this?" She was silent. She didn't answer right away. But then, as if a floodgate had opened, the words began to pour out, broken, choked, but clear. "Over 2 years. I'm the 6th person, or maybe the 7th. Logan clenched the paper. "Are you sure?" Sophie nodded faintly. "At least 3 people before me. One was named Jasmine. She was a single mum too. When he forced her to pay, she chose to quit. Dennis spread a rumor that she stole money to smear her name." She paused for a moment, then continued. "The second one, Tyler, paid half the money and then quit too. And the third, he tried to fight back. But Dennis sent a report straight to HR with a fake video. Now he has a suspended sentence for property theft. He lost everything." Logan swallowed hard. "And HR did nothing?" he asked, his voice growing deeper. Sophie let out a small laugh, a laugh that was both bitter and helpless. "The regional manager for this station is named Brian Hughes, Dennis's cousin. Every complaint from an employee gets cleaned up before it goes any higher. Send a complaint. Your internal account gets locked. Call the hotline. No one ever calls back." The room seemed to shrink around them. Logan felt his hand clench so tightly that his knuckles ached. But he kept his voice as calm as possible. "Why didn't you quit or report it?" "Because I don't have a choice." Her voice broke. "I have a son. He has severe asthma. I make $13.50 an hour. His medicine is over $300 a month. Rent is up. Food is up. I can't lose this job. And if I have a theft on my record, I'll never get hired anywhere else." A single tear fell onto the cold concrete floor. "I'm not a thief, Jake. I've never taken anything. He's the one who changes the transaction times. He uses his access to edit them, then prints out the old report to use as proof. I don't know what to do." Logan placed a hand on her shoulder, gently, not rushing. "And you think you're alone?" Sophie said nothing, but her eyes flickered. "You're not," he said. "Not anymore. He picked the wrong person." A moment of silence. Then she asked, as a defensive reflex, "Why are you helping me? You've only been here 2 days. You don't even know me." Logan looked directly into her eyes. "Because I know exactly what kind of man he is, and I've let people like him exist in my system for far too long." She didn't understand what he meant, but she could feel the sincerity in his eyes. "Let me see the note again," Logan said. She handed it back. He took out his phone, turned on the camera, and photographed every detail: the handwriting, the printed text, the logo, and the highlighted marks. "What are you going to do?" Sophie asked. Logan put his phone away, his eyes fixed and determined. "Get started, step by step, but not alone." Sophie looked at him for a long moment. That look was no longer one of fear. It was the look of someone starting to believe that miracles might be real. A sudden knock on the door. "Break time's over, Sophie." Dennis's voice echoed through the door, as cold as a closing trap. She stood up, straightened her uniform, but this time, when she looked into Logan's eyes, she didn't look down. Sophie returned to her shift with a changed demeanor. She still kept her head down, still worked quickly like the familiar shadow in the bright fuel system. But Logan saw it. Her eyes were no longer empty. Something was flickering within them like an ember that had just been gently blown upon. Logan stood behind the counter, his eyes scanning the store, but his mind was calculating every step. He knew to take down someone like Dennis, the evidence had to be undeniable. Not just words, not just tears, but numbers, data, the system itself. The very things Dennis used to bind others would now become the noose around his own neck. That evening, Logan pretended to stay late, helping Sophie count the cigarette inventory, one of the tasks that required 2 people. In reality, it was an opportunity to speak privately. "Sophie, are the cameras at this station connected externally?" She looked at him, wary. "Only the cameras at the gas pumps connect to corporate. The ones inside the store are managed by Dennis." "Why do you ask?" Logan nodded slowly. "Because if we can prove Dennis altered transaction times, the footage from the pump cameras can be cross-referenced." Her eyes widened. "But how do you know that—" Logan paused. A beat. Then he answered, still in character, as Jake. "The old station I worked at had a case of a customer who didn't pay. Corporate pulled the external camera footage. The local manager couldn't interfere. That's how I know." Sophie was still suspicious, but she nodded. "That makes sense. But if you're wrong, then—" "I'm not wrong," Logan replied softly, his eyes still holding hers. The next day, everything seemed normal. But no one knew that Logan had been up until 3 a.m. On his hotel room desk was a stack of documents from the internal audit system. He was the one who had approved the new security policy a year ago. And now, He was using that very policy to reclaim justice for the voiceless. He had also made a call to 2 senior financial executives at Bright Fuel, people he trusted. No one knew that call had triggered a secret investigation from the central office. That afternoon, Sophie called him into a corner of the stockroom and whispered, "Do you have a laptop?" Logan nodded. "I do. Dennis goes out for a smoke break at 2:30 every afternoon. He never takes his computer with him. I know the password to his office computer. It's his license plate, RHC981. She hesitated. "Are you going to go in?" Logan looked at her, his gaze filled with determination. "Not just go in. I'm going to copy his entire profile." She swallowed hard. "We have 5 minutes." 2:27 p.m. The back door opened. Dennis stepped out, a Marlboro in his hand, his eyes scanning the area as usual. He had no idea that the countdown to his end had begun. Logan and Sophie entered his office. A small room with a desk piled high with papers, a laptop open to the login screen. Sophie quickly typed in the characters, RHC981. Enter. The machine unlocked. They dove in. Logan opened a folder named Employee Performance. Inside were dozens of documents, a folder for each person. Sophie's file contained the accusation of a cash shortage, all with evidence of altered transaction times. "Look at this," Sophie pointed. An Excel file named Reconciliation Private XLSX. Logan opened it and was stunned. A list of employees, the amount of money repaid each month, the time of the adjustment, the fabricated reason. The final column was clearly labeled DC Share, Dennis Cole, BH Cut, Brian Hughes. A total of over $155,000 in 2 years. Logan pulled a USB drive from his pocket and plugged it into the machine. He copied the entire folder, then quickly pulled it out. Just then, footsteps. Dennis was coming back. "Grab the files from the drawer," Sophie whispered. They both bent down as if looking for a form. The door opened. Dennis entered, frowning. "What's this?" he asked sharply. Logan remained calm. "Mike said, you keep the shift adjustment forms in here. I need to fix yesterday's shift." Dennis narrowed his eyes. "Those forms are out at the counter, not in here." Logan smiled faintly. "I'm new. My mistake." Dennis looked at Sophie, then at Logan, then back at Sophie. But he couldn't do anything, not without a reason. "Everybody out. And you. Sophie, stay. I have something to ask you in private." Logan stood up, his eyes never leaving her. She gave a slight nod as if to say, "I'm okay." But Logan knew it was time for phase 2. The next morning, Bright Fuel Station number 12 was shrouded in a strange silence. No more of Dennis's shouting, not even the usual background music. Only the gentle whir of the fan and the soft clicks of the cash register. Logan arrived earlier than usual. On his chest, hidden beneath his blue and grey uniform, was a miniature audio recorder, a professional-grade device used by Bright Fuel's internal security that very few people knew about, except for senior management. He himself had once approved the budget for it. Outside the station, a black SUV was parked quietly in a corner of the lot, no company logo, no one getting in or out. But Logan knew he was no longer alone. Dennis walked in at 7:10 a.m. as usual. But today, his expression was restless, like a man who had just heard something he wasn't supposed to hear. He gripped his phone tightly, constantly checking messages. During the morning meeting, the atmosphere was more suffocating than ever. He said nothing to anyone besides a few reminders about internal security and rules for accessing management areas. But his eyes were glued to Sophie and to Logan. After the meeting, he called Sophie into his office. The door closed. Logan walked over to the hallway, stood by the vending machine, and pretended to choose a drink. Through the slightly ajar door, Dennis's voice came through sharp and cold as steel. "You were on my computer yesterday, weren't you?" "No, Dennis. I was just looking for the shift adjustment form." "Telling the truth won't get you out of this. That $750 is now $950. The deadline is tomorrow. If not..." His voice lowered, but Logan's recorder captured every word. "And if you think reporting this to the company will help, remember this: who approves the regional review for Brian? I do. Who approves HR complaints? I do. You want to play games, play big, but you'll have to face the consequences." A moment of silence. Then Sophie's voice, trembling but not broken. "I don't have the money." "Then go find it. Sell your things. Go into debt. Or get ready to leave here with a property theft charge stamped on your record forever." Logan stepped away from his position, his heart pounding. The answer was clear. Dennis wasn't just a threat, he was a systematic predator. That afternoon, when Dennis stepped out of the office, Logan approached him, putting on an air of hesitation, of weakness, a perfect cover. "Dennis," he called softly, "could I talk to you for a second in private?" Dennis looked him up and down. "What is it?" Logan glanced around, feigning secrecy. I heard about the Sophie situation. I'm behind on child support myself. If you ever need someone to handle the books, adjust the times, I know how. I studied some accounting before life went sideways." Dennis froze. "You want in?" he asked, his eyes lighting up, but still suspicious. Logan lowered his head. "As long as I don't lose my job, I'm good at keeping quiet." Dennis let out a small laugh. That smile, Logan would never forget it. It was the smile of a predator who had just caught the scent of blood. "All right, you'll close with me tonight. I'll show you how it all works." 7:45 p.m. The store was empty. Only the dim yellow light cast a glow on the counter. Logan sat beside Dennis in the office, the computer screen displaying the day's revenue report. "Watch this," Dennis said, his hands flying across the keyboard. He adjusted a transaction time, re-entered a cash amount, and deleted a refund transaction, all in less than 2 minutes. The system is perfect. The transaction is valid. No one ever finds the surplus cash. And if someone complains, the records will show that they were the ones who made the mistake. Logan nodded, feigning admiration. And even if someone reports it, so what? Brian approves everything, and I'm the final check. My sister works in the admin office. They don't stand a chance. Logan asked softly, as light as the wind. Have you been doing this long? Dennis smirked. Long enough to know when I can trust someone. And I think I can trust you. But what Dennis didn't know was that, at that very moment, a high-quality audio recording was capturing every single word he had just uttered. And just a few hours later, that audio file would be on the desk of the executive vice president of Bright Fuel, along with all the Excel documents, the statements, the photos, and the time-stamped video footage. Monday morning, a grey sky blanketed the town of Medford. A light drizzle smeared the neon lights of the Bright Fuel number 12 sign. Dennis walked into the store with an unusually confident expression, no longer scowling, not yelling at anyone. Instead, he wore a knowing smile. "Listen up, team," he called out. The employees stopped what they were doing. The air in the station grew taut like a guitar string. "We're about to have a surprise inspection from corporate," Dennis said with a smirk, smoothing his shirt. "Mr. Brian Hughes, the regional manager, will be here at 9 a.m. Sophie flinched. She glanced at Logan. Her eyes were filled with panic. "Is he really coming?" she whispered. Logan gave a slight nod, but he said nothing, because he knew Brian wasn't the only one coming today. 8:55 a.m. A black SUV glided into the parking lot. Behind it was a luxury sedan with no Bright Fuel logo. From the two vehicles, 4 people emerged, all in impeccable suits, their expressions serious. Dennis adjusted his tie and walked eagerly to the door to greet them. "Morning, boss," he said loudly as he saw Brian enter. "What a surprise to have you here this morning." Brian Hughes, a familiar face from company conference photos, didn't smile, nor did he shake his hand. He gave a slight nod, but his voice was deep and curt. "Let's get straight to it. We need to borrow the back meeting room. I need all employees in there, including you, Dennis." Dennis froze, but only for a moment. He quickly recovered his smile. "Of course. I'll get the room ready." 9:07 a.m. In the small meeting room behind the station, the entire staff stood in a circle. Logan, Sophie, Mike, and 3 others. Brian stood beside 2 internal investigators from the company, a man and a woman, carrying tablets and thick file folders. The air was thick, suffocating. Dennis still stood at the head of the table, feigning confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," the female investigator began, "we are conducting an in-depth review into financial misconduct, data manipulation, and employee coercion throughout the Bright Fuel system." Dennis's eye began to twitch. Station 12 was selected as the first site for this audit. The man beside her added, "Because data from the Central Financial Control System has flagged this station with 29 anomalies over the past 24 months. Dennis gave a twisted smile. There may have been some errors from training new employees. I'm always trying to make adjustments." "No," the female investigator cut him off. "We are not talking about minor errors. We are talking about systematic manipulation, recordings, documents, time alterations, false accusations." The room held its breath. Then, the sound of a chair scraping back. Logan stepped forward, calmly, deliberately. He took off the bright fuel cap, removed his glasses. The entire room fell silent. Sophie gasped. Dennis blinked, taking half a step back. What the hell?" Logan looked directly at him. "I am Logan Mitchell, the founder and CEO of Bright Fuel." The statement hit the room like a clap of thunder. Sophie covered her mouth, her eyes welling up with tears. Dennis turned pale. His entire body went rigid, as if frozen in place. "And I," Logan continued, "have spent the last week working as a new employee under the name Jake Parker, to witness firsthand what is happening in the station that was once my pride and joy." Dennis stammered, "No, that's impossible." "We have a recording of you threatening Sophie," the female investigator said. "We have a USB drive containing every file you altered, including the reconciliation private XLSX file with the DC share and BH cut columns." Brian Hughes's face turned ashen. "We have time-stamped video from the pump cameras which cannot be altered to prove every single manipulation of transaction times." Logan took a step closer to Dennis. He looked him straight in the eye. "You didn't just take money. You took trust, safety, and the dignity of others, the very people I was supposed to protect." Dennis backed away, panicked. "It's all lies. It's a setup. You don't have any real proof." Logan gave a slight nod. The female investigator opened her tablet, and then Dennis's own voice filled the room, crystal clear. "The system is perfect. The transactions are valid. And if someone reports it, Brian approves everything. I'm the final check." Dennis staggered, as if he'd been punched in the chest. The back door opened. 2 uniformed police officers stepped into the room. Logan spoke softly. "Sophie, you can show the officers in. They have a few questions for Dennis, and for Brian as well." She nodded. Her eyes, for the first time in 2 years, were held high. Dennis stood silently, his face white as a sheet. As the 2 officers approached, one of them pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Dennis Cole, you are under arrest on charges including fraud, employee coercion, and extortion in a workplace environment." He turned his head toward Brian, pleading, "Do something. Brian, tell them to stop. We're a team, right?" Brian Hughes did not answer, nor did he move. He stood like a stone statue, his face grey, his eyes staring into nothingness. Logan looked at him, the man he had once trusted, the man promoted for his perfect numbers. A system of fraud like this isn't built by one man alone. It's built by those who choose silence, who choose to protect power over people. The female investigator announced coldly, "Brian Hughes, you are suspended from your duties, effective immediately. we have a warrant to search all accounts connected to you. Internal data matches the profit-sharing scheme in the reconciliation system." Brian tried to maintain his composure, but his shoulders were visibly trembling. The police brought out another pair of handcuffs. Dennis began to struggle, shouting, "You're listening to a new guy, to some dirt-poor cashier. You're all just minimum-wage nobodies. You think you can win against me?" Logan didn't respond. He simply gestured to the female investigator. She pressed a button. Dennis's voice echoed again this time, a different clip, from the night Logan had cooperated. "My sister works in the admin office. They don't stand a chance. Sophie is so weak. One little scare and she pays up." Every eye in the room turned to him. There was no authority left in his posture, only disgust and shock. The police snapped the cuffs shut. Dennis screamed one last time, "You'll regret this. It's all a fabrication." Logan stepped closer, face to face. "This isn't a fabrication. This is the end of a rotten chapter, and the beginning of a new one where people like you no longer have a place." The sound of a police car door slamming shut echoed from outside. Dennis was escorted out in full view of the entire staff. No one looked away. No one bowed their head. They watched him leave like watching a nightmare dissolve in the morning light. Brian Hughes. Once the regional legend, was led away moments later without saying a single word. In the meeting room, the atmosphere changed completely. Mike, who had once only dared to give Logan a quiet pat on the shoulder, now held his head high. The new employees, who had only heard vague rumors about Dennis, now understood that the truth was stronger than fear. Sophie stood in the middle of the room, her eyes red but steady. Logan turned back, looking at the entire team. "I owe all of you an apology," he said, his voice deep but clear. Bright Fuel was built on decency, fairness, and people, but somewhere along the way, we lost our path. We let the system hide the things we needed to face head-on. He took a breath, then continued. "From this day forward, things will be different, not just at this station, but across the entire Bright Fuel system." Everyone fell silent. Logan looked over at Sophie. "And the first change starts with her." He turned to the investigation team. "I am officially appointing Sophie Lane as the Assistant Operations Manager of Station 12. As of today, she will represent a new culture, a culture of courage, integrity, and dignity." The room erupted in applause. Sophie stood stunned, her lips parted. Then she nodded. A small nod, but one that held 2 years of tears. Pain, and finally, victory. 1 month later, the early morning light shone on a newly installed sign, Bright Fuel, Station 12, pioneering a new way. The old, peeling paint was gone, as was the cloud of cigarette smoke that used to hang around the entrance. In its place were small flower pots lining the walkway, a white-painted bench under the awning, a place where customers could rest, not rushed by a clock or a supervisor's gaze. Inside, even the air seemed to breathe differently. The gas station that was once the notorious pressure cooker of the region had become a vibrant space. The break room wall was freshly painted, decorated with green plants, an automatic coffee machine, clean cushioned chairs, and personal lockers with each employee's name. And in the middle of this scene, Sophie Lane emerged from the small office behind the counter for the first time, not with dark circles under her eyes or slumped shoulders, but with a straight posture, clear eyes, and a name tag that read Assistant Manager, Sophie Lane. She walked lightly, but every step was a testament. The past doesn't define you, the choice to face it does. This morning was the official relaunch of Bright Fuel Station number 12. Logan had arrived early, no longer in the blue and grey uniform of Jake Parker, but in a simple suit, a collared shirt with no tie, still the boss. But today, he was part of the team, not to direct, but to listen. Logan, a voice called from the door. It was Jasmine, the former employee Dennis had forced out. She walked in, holding the hand of a small boy about 5 years old, her eyes full of excitement. Sophie ran to hug her. "You really came," Jasmine smiled, her eyes welling up. "Not just came. I'm back on the morning shift starting tomorrow. Thanks to the new childcare assistance program, I can work part-time and still take care of my son." The little boy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Miss Sophie, does our playroom really have a slide?" Sophie laughed. "It has a slide, books, cookies, and a very nice babysitter." All three of them laughed together. Logan watched quietly from the back, holding a cup of coffee. He saw Mike now, a shift supervisor, patiently showing a new employee how to process a return. His voice was gentle, patient. He saw Emily, who Dennis had tried to frame, standing in the customer service area, helping an elderly woman choose the right motor oil. He saw trust returning, and then something small but deeply meaningful happened. A nervous young woman walked in, clutching a job application. The young cashier was about to step out to greet her when Sophie moved forward first, gently taking the application. "Hi there, I'm Sophie. You're here to apply, right?" The girl nodded. "Yes, I don't have much experience. I used to be a waitress, but I was let go unexpectedly." Sophie smiled softly. "I started in that position too. Here, we don't need perfect people. We just need people who want to be decent." The girl was surprised, her eyes shining. Sophie extended a hand. "Let's chat for a bit." "Okay. Would you like a hot chocolate?" The girl nodded. Sophie turned back and waved gently toward the counter. "Jake, can I get a hot chocolate with extra cream? Please." Logan paused. His eyes softened. It was the first time that fake name had become a real part of this place. The relaunch ceremony for Bright Fuel Station number 12 wasn't grand. There were no fireworks, no flashy banners, but for those present that day, it meant more than any other ceremony. Logan stepped onto a small platform made from stacked supply boxes. He didn't hold a microphone, didn't need a spotlight. He just stood among the people who had been looked down upon, who had been forced into silence, and for the first time they were all looking toward a future free from fear. "Today isn't just the reopening of Station 12, Logan began, his voice deep and warm. "It is the day Bright Fuel finds its reason for being again." He paused for a beat. "I used to think success was about numbers, reports, and growth charts. But after a week working alongside all of you, I realized success isn't found on paper. It's in the way Sophie patiently counted every single coin, even when her hands were shaking. It's in Mike being willing to share his shift with a single mom. It's in Jasmine bringing her son to reapply for her job because she believed this place had changed." He looked around at each face, no longer bowed. They were listening to him, as if for the first time in their lives. Their voices were being answered. "And so, from today, Bright Fuel is officially implementing a series of changes. First, an absolute ban on managers supervising their own relatives or close acquaintances. Regional positions will be rotated, with independent external oversight. Second, the establishment of an employee protection department, where all complaints go directly to corporate headquarters, no intermediaries. All files will be kept confidential. Third, an 18% increase in the base salary across the entire system, with special stipends for single parents, caregivers, and part-time students. Fourth, each quarter, Bright Fuel will send senior executives to work undercover, just as I did, to understand, listen, and act based on reality. Fifth, we will partner with legal and union organizations to clear all false accusations from old records, while also compensating former victims of extortion. Applause rippled through the room, not in unison, but sincere. Logan gave a slight bow and stepped off the platform. He walked toward the back of the store where Sophie was checking the coffee station. She turned as he approached, as if she knew what he wanted to say. "I thought, after everything, you would never come back here," she said with a small smile. Not the tired smile from a month ago, but the smile of someone standing firm on her own 2 feet. Logan leaned lightly against the counter. "I thought so too. But that day, when I saw you help that elderly woman to her car, then turn back and wipe your hands on your apron as if nothing was more important than kindness, I knew you were the one who taught me what I had forgotten." She tilted her head. "What's that?" He looked at her, his gaze deep. "That a company isn't a building, or stocks, or a brand. It's people. It's the people who stand quietly at the register, in the stockroom, the ones who remain good even when the world tells them they're weak." A moment of silence. Then Sophie said softly, "I don't know how to thank you." Logan shook his head. "No need for thanks. Just live. Hold on to that spirit, and when it's your turn to see someone else shaking like you once did, be there, Jake." Sophie nodded. This time, not tearfully, not hesitantly, just the calm nod of a person who was no longer afraid of the dark. Late that afternoon, Logan stood quietly by the glass window of Bright Fuel number 12, holding a cup of coffee freshly brewed from the new machine in the break room. The last rays of sun streamed through the window, bathing the tidy shelves and the smiling employees in a golden light, smiling not out of fear, but because they were allowed to be themselves. Across the lot, Sophie was bent over, helping an old man reattach the gas nozzle to his tank. The wind gently tousled her hair, but she didn't mind. When the old man smiled and shook her hand, Logan saw something he thought had been lost from his system trust. A door chime rang. Logan turned. A man in a business suit, handcuffed, was led in by two officers. His face was pale. Logan recognized him immediately. It was Sean Lawman, Brian Hughes's former assistant, the man rumored to be the backstage cleaner whenever the books were off. Sean looked at Logan. His voice rushed. "I can explain. I didn't do everything they said. I just—" Logan cut him off, gently but firmly. "I'm not listening to explanations anymore. From now on, I'm letting justice do the talking." Sean bowed his head and quietly followed the police. The door closed. Sophie walked in, a light smudge of oil on her sleeve. She looked at Logan and smiled. One more person in their rightful place. He smiled back. "Every bad seed leaves a trail, but if we're patient, we'll pull them all." She nodded, then looked outside. "They used to say we were the lowest level of the company, but I think we're the foundation." Logan looked at her for a moment. He didn't speak. Then he walked toward the door, turned back, and said, "You're right. And from now on, this company will be rebuilt from the ground up." 2 weeks later, Bright Fuel announced the Phoenix Program, a comprehensive reform initiative across all gas stations, starting with 15 stations in 3 states. All management processes would be audited from scratch. All employees who had quit due to false accusations would be invited back to work, with full benefits and back pay restored. An emergency humanitarian fund was established to support single parents, those with sick relatives, or employees facing a crisis. Sophie was chosen as the program's first ambassador. Her name was included in the new training materials, alongside a quote of her own: "Sometimes to change an entire system, you don't need power. You just need the courage to stop being silent." A few months later, Logan returned to Station 12, unannounced, as quietly as the first time. He walked into the store, now completely transformed. The employees recognized him and greeted him with friendly smiles, not robotic, not fake. At the coffee station, a little boy was arranging sugar packets in a tray. A young woman standing nearby said, "Jason, remember to say thank you." The boy smiled. "Thank you for giving my mum a chance." Logan glanced over. It was Jasmine and her son. In the distance, Sophie was guiding 2 new employees on how to handle a customer complaint with listening, not with warnings. She caught Logan's eye. She didn't greet him in a reporting manner, just gave a slight nod, like friends who understood each other without needing words. And in that moment, Logan realized, justice doesn't always come quickly, but when someone is brave enough to start, it will come, not with the gavel of a court, but with quiet, persistent kindness day by day. A CEO went undercover to find a flaw in the system. But in the end, he found himself in the eyes of those who were considered the lowest. And he learned that what builds a lasting empire is not money, but trust. Remember this one act of kindness, one voice at the right time, can change not just a gas station, but an entire generation of how we lead,